Ladies and gentlemen, you're rocking with a GOAT. Kenn Dowell giving you motivation for growth. 2 toes down, he keep it realer than most. He do it for the culture, that's always the goal. This is Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell. This is Strategic Moves with Kenn.
I want to welcome you to our very first podcast today. You're with Strategic Moves. I'm your host, Kenn Dowell. And today we want to talk a bit about faith without works. I think people today talk about how much they want to get out here and do things. People feel that they, in their minds, believe that if I believe something hard enough that it'll happen. You have to actually put the work in. And so my guest that I have today is somebody that I believe has been not only believing in herself and doing what it takes, but also has been actually putting the work in. And she's been a person that's been around for a long time in my life and been able to help me through quite a bit of issues. So I would like to introduce everyone today to Dr. Jackie Chisholm.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it.
I was going to read your resume, but your resume is so long. So what I will say is that I do know that you have been around for quite a bit. You have several degrees. So I'm going to let you tell us your degrees.
Okay, so the bachelor's in medical anthropology, and the master's in psychological anthropology, and the PhD is in psychological anthropology.
And what is that?
What we basically tell people is cross-cultural psych. Mm-hmm. And I give people an example in New Guinea. This is one of the things that I learned when I was in school. So in Papua New Guinea, if a woman complains about her heart hurting, mm-hmm. then it means her husband's cheating on her. Take the same woman in the United States, they would run tests on her heart.
One more time.
Sure. So a woman comes to a doctor and says, I have a pain in my heart. Mm-hmm. In Western medicine, they would run a series of tests, EKGs, they do blood work. Well, in Papua New Guinea, that physician knows that her husband is cheating on her.
Really? Mm-hmm. Is that a fact?
Yes.
Really?
It's cultural.
That's deep. Before we get into your degrees, give me a background on yourself. You grew up on the southeast side of town, right? You grew up and went to John Hay? No, you went to Kennedy. Right. Let me get that right. You went to Kennedy. That's correct.
Right. Let's see. My father and mother lived on Scoville. That's where I was born.
Okay.
And then we moved from Scoville to 93rd. And this was after my mom got a divorce. 93rd in Kinsman, and 123rd in Kinsman, and then 143rd in Kinsman. So that's where I was when I went to Kennedy. It was 143rd in Kinsman.
143rd in Kinsman. And you say your mom and dad got a divorce. So
they got a divorce because of domestic violence.
Oh, so you grew up single parent with your mom? Mm-hmm. And what was it like growing up in a violent household with a lot of violence?
That was really difficult. I remember my sister, my older sister, who's 3 years older than I am, her name is Karen. Mm-hmm. Karen has more memories than I do. Mm-hmm. I just remember jumping on Daddy one night when he was beating Mama and walking on eggshells a lot because you never knew what kind of took them off. The proudest day for me was the day that my mother decided she was tired. Mm-hmm. And she had 3 children. I think all of us were under the age of 11. When she walked out. And my father, he would go to work, but every Friday he'd come home, change clothes, and we wouldn't see him again until Monday. And it was because he was spending time with his other family. He had a woman and her children he was taking care of. And during one of these weekends, my mother packed all our stuff.
Wow.
Put his stuff on we used to live on the second floor of a house, packed his stuff in a garbage bag and put it on the porch, and we were gone.
Wow.
So when he came home Monday, we were gone.
Really?
That was one of my proudest moments of my mom. That took a lot to be a single parent with 3 children under the age of 11. Mm-hmm. And her husband, for whatever reason, decided that he didn't want the responsibility. Better yet, he wanted the responsibility of another woman's family. He didn't want the responsibility of his own children.
Wow. That had to be hurtful.
Yeah, she was. But what I think she made the decision that it was hard. Raising 3 small children by herself. She didn't drive, so she used to take buses. She used to work at Charity. She was a surgical technician. And she started dating this guy who was the son of these people who had a store. Before there was credit cards, you used to get credit at a store.
Correct.
Okay, so the store was down the street from where we lived. And my mother used to go there and get credit so we'd have some food. And so she met him. She decided to marry him. And I think the reason she decided to marry him was to put a roof over her children's head. The problem is he was an alcoholic. So we went from domestic violence in the household to alcoholic. There were times you didn't know if he was going to burn the house down. I laugh about it now, but it wasn't fun. And people would say, oh, I saw your stepfather staggering down the street. And I would say, that's not my stepfather, it's my mother's husband. I had nothing to do with that. There was one time I distinctly remember with him, at some point, I assume we're going to get into this conversation. Being first generation college student, the more you learn, the more you become different from the people in your household. And so he used to say things about, oh, you think you're so smart. Oh, you think you're so smart. And then there was one day I came home, I was living at my mother's house at the time, and he knocked on my door. He wanted to have sex with me.
Really?
Yes. And so I started sleeping with a chair under my door, and I had to get out of that. That's how I got married the first time. Was to get out that household.
Wow. Now, that's really deep. You're talking about getting out of the fire into the frying pan. I mean,
and I think at the time my mother made that decision, it was hard for me to accept it at the time because it was like, why would you leave a man who was beating you to go to a person who was an alcoholic? And at the time my thought was, she thought she could control him. And the reality is that, no, she couldn't. But given her circumstances, my father wasn't paying child support. When they got a divorce, he had a lawyer, she didn't. And so I think he only had to pay $10 per child per week and couldn't figure out how to do that while he was traveling, doing stuff. And I think he said, her second husband said, I will buy you a house. And she said, okay. And I think that was her, if I were being fair to my mother, because at the time it was hard being fair when you knew that you're bringing an alcoholic into the household with 3 girls. But if being fair to my mom, I don't think she felt she had any options. And that was her best option. And so he did what he said he was going to do. He put a roof over her head. But it came with all these other things that she had to deal with.
So how long did y'all deal with that?
Until she died.
Really? Yeah,
she died at the age of 53. And 3 weeks later, he was remarried to somebody in Tennessee. I know. And then what I heard, it's one of those things, being careful what you wish for. So he apparently was going down to Tennessee periodically to see his woman. And so 3 weeks after Mama died, we literally just put her in the ground, her body in the ground, and he was on his way to Tennessee. So I heard that she was a school teacher or a principal of a school, and he used to come to her class drunk. And God knows my heart. First thought I had was, see, that's what happens when you do stuff like that. But eventually, a lesson that I learned from him, he had cirrhosis of the liver. He should have died, but instead he buried my mother. And it's not his fault that my mother died. She had a heart condition. But my mother the whole time kept saying, she kept thinking that he was going to die first because he had cirrhosis of the liver. So when she wrote her will, the will was, if she died, she got everything. If he died, she got everything. She didn't think she was going to die first. So when she died, and she didn't tell us what the will, she kept telling us, if anything happens to me, he's going to sell the house, he's going to take half, and the other half that you all will get. It's not what she put in her will. And so it's always, number one, the Bible says, be careful about digging ditches. Right. Because she dug that ditch thinking that he was going to fall in it, and she was one that did instead.
That had to be a crazy experience growing up.
It was so chaotic. Growing up with those kinds of experiences, but number one, with domestic violence in the household, but then an alcoholic who eventually starts approaching me, I just wanted peace. I wanted stability. College for me, school for me was stability. I used to say, as long as I could get to class, I was blessed to have some phenomenal teachers, people who supported me. And that's from elementary school through college. That was my haven. A book was my haven. I used to go to the library and sit on the floor and read all these books. I would take 8 of them home and I would hold up in my room because that was my like I said, my haven. I knew early on, and part of it was because my mother kept saying education was important. That's all she preached was education. And part of that was because in her household, my grandfather didn't believe in educating his children, especially not his girls. She wanted to be a nurse. He wouldn't pay for it. She became a surgical technician because she went through a program. And so they paid for it. But that wasn't what she wanted to be, was a nurse. Then some of the lessons that she taught me was, number one, even when she had an opportunity to become a nurse, I think she was afraid to try. And so a good portion of watching my mother and hearing her say education is important, do as I say, not as I do.
Interesting.
So I watched people around me, the neighborhoods that we were in, especially 143rd. Almost all the girls, young women, they focused on men. They focused on, having babies, which made no sense to me. And all I focused on, I'm not going to get stuck here. I'm going to school. I'm going to college. I didn't know where it was going to lead, but it was getting the hell out of
So let's talk about getting out of there and getting able to go to Case. Case is in a average school that most people get an opportunity to go to, especially poor people. So how did that come about, and how did you get an opportunity to get into Case Western Reserve?
So here's the funny thing, because we didn't go. We haven't talked about the fact that I was in an abusive relationship. From the age of 14 until I was 19. The abuse started a year into it.
With who?
Boyfriend.
At the age of 14? You had a boyfriend at 14?
At the age of 14, I had a boyfriend.
So you just said you wasn't studying boys.
Popped up. So he was my sister's boyfriend's best friend.
Oh,
and so when he came over, he brought him up, so we started talking. And it was stupid. He was 6 years older than I was. So he should have been in prison.
Right.
But at the time, my ego was, wow, this older person is interested in me. And he started, remember, we didn't have a lot. He was buying my clothes. He took care of me. He made sure I got to school. He was doing all that stuff. And what I learned from that experience was usually an abuser, what they'll do is they'll start doing all these things for you and pull you away from everybody. They pull you away from your family. They pull you away from your friends. They become your sole source for everything. By the time I figured that out, it was too late. I was involved in that relationship. And like I said, about the age of 15 is when he started beating me. The first time he hit me, I went to hit him back and got hit even harder. And what I, again, learned from that, and you'll hear me say that a lot, is what did I learn from that experience? Because otherwise you're destined potentially to repeat it. What I learned was, when I saw my father beat my mother, in the back of your mind, you start thinking that's normal. And at the time, I didn't realize that. So I had to go into counseling to figure this out. I knew that I wanted better than that. So even though I wasn't one of these people going, oh, I need to have a boyfriend, I got to have one of those. It was, he was there. He made me feel safe until he didn't make me feel safe. And the way that I got out of it, he did not want me to go to school. He didn't want me to go to college. Matter of fact, he said, why don't you wait a year? But I knew if I waited a year, I'd never go. And he called me stupid one day. And this man was kicking my behind. But the minute he called me stupid, I was like, I'm a lot of things. Stupid ain't one of them. And so at that point, it was, what do I need to do to get out of this? You get to the point where you start saying, how did I get here? How did I wind up here? So you ask the question about how did I get to Case? When I was 9 years old, remember we used to go on these field trips. All right, so we went to the orchestra. And I looked across the street, and Case was there. And I didn't remember this until I was at Case, when I was a student at Case. And I looked across the street, and I said, what is that? And an adult said, that's Case Western Reserve. And I said, I'm going there. I got to Case because that was the only other place I wanted, the only place I applied. My counselors kept saying, you need a backup school. There's no guarantee that you're going to get into Case. And I was like, they don't know me. I'm going to Case. I eventually, because they told me, I did apply to Cleveland State. But I only wanted Case. Now, if you were to ask the question why, I have no answer for that. I just knew I'm going to Case. If I'm staying in Cleveland, I should tell you I'm a little on the bougie side. I don't know. But my attitude had always been, if that is the best place to go,
I won't go to the best.
I won't go there. Why wouldn't I? Okay. So I applied, and they turned me down. I got this flash letter. Another story real quick. There was a teacher named Kennedy, and it was the major work program, and I was in the math class. And there was some concept that he was writing on the blackboard, and I didn't understand it. And he said, if you don't know that, he said, if you don't understand that, you don't belong here. And there were only 8 of us in the class, and these were all like my best friends. And so I was so embarrassed by that comment. So what I did was I picked up my books and I marched to the end of the class, the back of the class. And I was like, I'm just not going to learn anymore. Thinking that it's going to hurt his little feelings. Guess what? I stopped learning. And that was, it affected me every math class after that, because I didn't learn what I needed to learn there. So I let my ego get in the way. So there are people who, when they come up against something, they'll say, I can show you better than I can tell you.
Right.
My attitude was, if that's how you feel about me, and I took that, and instead of using it to let me show you what I can do, I just stopped learning.
Wow.
So I had a D in math. Every math class I had after that, I had a D. A's in everything else, but math, I had a D. That's why Kate said no.
Wow.
Because I had all A's and a D. And when I took my ACT, I rated very high in everything but math. So unbeknownst to me, the chair of the math department, Mrs. Miller, called Case and said, you need to meet her. You need to interview her. And so one day she found me and she said, you have an interview with Case Western Reserve. I said, what? And she said, I called them. And I was like, okay. So I went and I talked to them. And then they conditionally admitted me. And I had to get a C or above in math.
Wow.
Okay. I wound up, when I got to Case, I got an A because it was never an issue of ability. It was my attitude about what this man said to me. And when I told him that Case admitted me, his exact words were, oh, I guess they need black students or some crazy, like, because he's a white guy. He said, oh, I didn't expect that at all. I guess they needed black students or more students. Just like that. I was like, oh, okay. Now, fast forward years later, I have my master's. I saw him. I was this close to saying something to him about how he damaged people. He damaged me. And I didn't. I could have, but I didn't. I found out several years later that I was recruiting for Case undergrad. And I went to Kennedy. I went back to Kennedy. And I told the story, didn't put a name to it. And a student came to me afterwards and said, was that, and I'm not going to use his name now, was that? And I said, it is. The person said he did the same thing to me. In that moment, I wrote a letter to the Department of Education for Cleveland Schools and said, you have known for years that this man is a problem. I said, and I gave him the example of what happened with me. And the fact that I went back to the school 20 years later.
Wow, and he's still
And
there.
this man, and the damage that he's done, I think they allowed him to retire. But they knew. There's no way they didn't.
I know that guy because he damaged me. I messed up to the A.
Yeah, just
I still ain't got
unconscionable.
over my education because of that.
Unconscionable. But the bottom line for me was Case was the only place I wanted to go.
Case Western Reserve. So how did you get there? You got there on a scholarship? You got there, you paid your way?
Financial aid.
Really?
Yes.
So after all of that, and he said that you got there because you were black and all of that, you still didn't get no black.
It's funny to me because you and I had this conversation. It was funny to me because this would have been during affirmative action.
Wow. Okay.
And so there were a number of us who were there, but it was only like 3% of the population. Case had 5,000 students. So you're not even talking 500 people. You're talking about 200 or 300 people. Right. There was an acknowledgement that we were there and that we were special. And the reason that there was an acknowledgement was because we were put into a program. And it's part of the TRIO program. It's called Special Support Services. So I was immediately enrolled in that. I didn't have a choice. And I'm thankful that I didn't have a choice. They were phenomenal people. And they were the ones who helped us understand what does college require. And they had already made the connections for us. The problem was Case lost that grant the next year. So freshman year, they were there holding our hands. The next year, they were gone.
Wow.
And so we're sitting there going, okay, so how do we do this now? And Case is not, it's my alma mater. I've gotten 3 degrees from there. But if you were to ask me what kind of support did they give you intentionally, I would say not much, other than the support service, and that was a grant. And when the grant was gone, that program was gone. So what was the commitment to students, first generation students like me? None.
Have you think they got better over the years?
No.
Really?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Do I think that it's intentional discrimination? No. Do I think it is willful ignorance? Yes. I do.
I don't know. I don't know. I have a hard time thinking that people just don't know. These are the smartest people, right?
Yeah, it's not that they don't know. So let's put it in business terms.
Okay.
Okay, because
that's probably where more it boils down to at the end.
Let's put it in business terms.
Okay.
The majority of the students who attend Case Western Reserve are not first generation.
Correct.
The vast majority, probably 80 to 90% are not first generation. So are you going to gear your resources to the 10%? And the reality is probably not. Now, you would if you cared about all of the students on the campus.
Right.
You would make provision for everybody there. But I don't think that's what they were thinking. I think they felt like we took care of them because we had this program. We went and got the grant, and the grant allowed us to hire all these folks. And then the grant was, do I think they did create a minority program, but not every student who's first generation is minority.
Okay.
Now, majority probably are, but not everybody. So they eventually got another grant for the Minority Scholars Program, and I wound up working for them.
Okay.
So it's not that I think, it's not that I don't think they care. It's not a high priority. That's what I think. It's just not a high priority.
So how did you end up working there?
Okay, so as I say, what happened was when I finished Case, I started working for May Company. I was recruited by May Company to work there and to become a buyer. And I hated that job. And I don't mean like a little bit of hate. I hated every aspect of that job. And that's primarily because of the attitude that people had. I walked in the door thinking that we were all there to help May Company make money and all that other stuff. So we were all in it together. And what I learned in that experience was, no, that person was out for themselves, that person was out for themselves, and they had no problem with throwing you under the bus in order to stand on you. And, and I had never had that experience before. I'm really Pollyanna. And I wound up quitting. I was pregnant with my first child. My husband and I had gotten married maybe a year and a half, a year before. And I was pregnant, and I was on the verge of losing her because of the stress related to that company. And the doctor said, if you don't quit, he said, you're going to lose your baby. Is that what you want? And I said, no. So I talked to my husband, I quit. And so I put myself through college because as a secretary. And so I knew I had the skill set. So I wound up working for Cleveland Clinic as a floor secretary. And then one day I had been praying, but you and I are going to have a conversation about faith. And so one day I was praying and I was like, God, what is it that you want me to do? Because I have this really nice degree from Case Western Reserve that I still owe money on. And I'm a secretary. I didn't need a degree to be a secretary. And out of the blue, this woman who lived in, I think, Minnesota, who used to be my career counselor at Case, called me. She found me and said the Case had this position available as an undergraduate recruiter. And she said, would you be interested in something like that? And I said, I think I would. And my reason for doing it was because I felt like my experiences could be helpful to students that I would recruit. Okay. And so after, I think, 14 interviews.
14
as in 11 people in the room, everybody getting the opportunity to have conversations with you. But 3 different interviews. Then I got a flush letter again saying, I'm sorry, we have really good candidates, but you didn't get it. And then 3 days later, I got a call from Case saying, offering me the position. I said, hold up, wait a minute. So I got on the phone because I knew people at Case. What happened? So apparently the guy that they offered the position to wanted more money than they were offering. And so I was the second candidate. Excellent. And I was like, you know what? I ain't mad. However God gets it to me. Right. So that was the job that I had initially on campus was undergraduate recruitment.
Oh, so that's where you did all your recruiting of students and that kind of stuff? For
about 3 years. I did that for 3 years. I was the co-coordinator of minority recruitment because remember, when I was there, it was only 3%. Right. When I got there again, it was only 3%, 3 or 4% as an employee. Right. So they hadn't changed. The lady who is the co-coordinator, her name is Linda Steele. Linda and I put together a plan, and we're like, this is what we're going to do. And the university had, again, they had gotten a grant. And the grant was to increase the number of students of color on campus. Okay. So we had this program. It was the first 2 years, no loans. And the second 2 years, you would have loans like everybody else, but the first 2 years, no loans. So Linda and I kept telling them, they gave us what they thought we would be able to do to accomplish. And we kept saying, your estimates are too low. We can do that easily. And so the first year we blew through all of their money. And we told them, we told you your numbers were too low. And then as a result of that, so now year 2, which should have been the second year of the grant, they've gone through all that money. And so what they did was cut it in half. So now the university has to put some money in. And so instead of all of the money, now it was half. And by the third year it was gone. The program was gone. Again. This is what I was saying before.
Yeah.
And I've said this to even people who work at Case. Things cost. It's not enough for you to say that it's important. Anything that's important, you invest money in it. And it's not like they don't have it. They're sitting on $1 billion endowment.
That's correct.
So if this was really of interest to them, serious about it, they would have endowed it. And they still haven't endowed it.
And so being there, what was the best experience you had working there at Case, though?
The best experience of working in Case, especially in recruitment, I wound up going into retention later on. It takes a lot to recruit a student, a first-generation student, because the parents they don't know what college is. They need somebody to help them with the paperwork.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're rocking with a GOAT. Kenn Dowell giving you motivation for growth. 2 toes down, he keep it realer than most. He do it for the culture, that's always the goal. Giving inspiration through information, providing liberation with conversation, giving fresh insight for elevation, cause he knows this is how we reach our greatness. And he riding with the people of all walks of life, cause we all kinfolk.
You're spending a lot of time trying to get them to come. So once they get there, my job was over. You know, once you make the decision to come, I'm done. But I couldn't be, because I've invested too much time and energy in trying to get the student and the parents to trust the university, to trust me. And so I was in the bathroom, and the woman who was in charge of minority recruitment said, I want you to work for me. I said, okay, doing what? And then she said, minority retention. It was perfect timing. Again, it was one of those, okay, God, this isn't working for me. I spent all that time and they're leaving, and then she comes to me. So the best time for me was not so much when the student came, it was when they finished. I don't think they fully understood was I was invested in their success.
I think that's where when I got an opportunity to meet you first time, you were at Case. I believe that's what you were doing then, right? I believe.
When you and I met, I was the director of community relations.
You was director of community relations. When I met you, you were with, you was doing that. I was working for Sabre Scott then, and I was helping her, and she was the councilwoman in Ward 8, and I remember us going over there, and she wanted to meet you, and she was so happy after she met you, because you had just became Dr. Chisholm at that time. And I remember that whole day she just kept talking about how happy she was and how excited. So you guys, she went to school with you guys, right?
So Sabre was there a year before me. So Sabre, so that program is talking about support services, special support services. They gave us peer counselors. Sabre was my peer counselor. Right.
Excellent.
Yeah, so she was a year ahead of me, and she was a person who was like, okay, you need to know this, you need to know that.
So she was almost doing what you were doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. That was good, because she was very excited. I remember that whole day, that's all she talked about.
Yeah, she's part of my success. I mean, she made it easier for me to transition to college.
Shouts out to Sabre for that. That was really good. I want to transition a little bit into this Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and because that's where me and you had a good opportunity to work together. So going over to the Rock Hall, how did that happen?
I knew that it was time for me to leave Case. I didn't know what the next step was going to be. And I was praying about it. I just said, okay, God, is this it? Was there more? And I literally heard at my desk that I needed to get ready to move. And I did like this. I looked around and I said, okay, God, look, every time in the past I thought you wanted me to leave, you promoted me. I said, I'm not unhappy about the promotions, don't get me wrong. I said, but I'm just going to wait until you tell me what get ready to move means. So I'm going to say maybe a few days later or something like that, I heard in my spirit, start cleaning your hard drive and take stuff home, take stuff off the wall. I was like, oh, you mean move? And I'm going, oh, we're going, where we going? So God said to me, get in touch with 3 people in a particular order. And so for the first person that I was to get in touch with was the president of Emory College. I met him when he was the interim president of Case. His name was Jim Wagner. The second person was Ron Richard, president of Cleveland Foundation. The third person was Dr. Jerry C. Thornton, the president of Tri-C, in that order. So I called Jim and I said, Jim's a Christian. I said, Jim, God told me to call you. He said, okay, hold on. Let me get a pad and pen. Let me take some notes. Okay, so at the end of it, he said, I think you should consider becoming the executive director of a nonprofit. I wasn't thinking about it. My plan was to become the president of a community college. I said, Jim, I know God told me to call you. So if that's the word that you have for me, I'm open to a nonprofit. The next person I met with Ron Richard. I didn't know what Ron believed one way or the other. I didn't know his belief, so I didn't go there when God told me to call you. So at the end of the conversation, I'm sitting there going, okay, God, I did what you wanted me to do, and you just keep moving. So the next day, I got a call from his vice president of human resources and said that Ron wants me to include you in a search. She said, now, I need to tell you that we're already, the last 2 candidates, but I'm going to send you the job description. And she said, look it over and see what you think. So I read it, and I did like this. God, I'll do it if you want me to do it, but it wasn't anything that made. And then the third person was Dr. Thornton. So again, I didn't know what her spiritual beliefs were, so I didn't go there with her. I just said, I believe it's time for me to leave Case, and I don't know necessarily what the next step would be. So she read my resume. She made a suggestion about a section that she wanted me to include. And a few days later, I got a call on a weekend. And my husband said, Dr. Thornton is on the phone. I said, stop lying. And he said, no, really, it's her.
Wow.
So I looked on the caller ID, and it said Cuyahoga Community College. So I pick up the phone, I go, hello? And she said, hi, Jackie, it's Jerry Sue. Did I get you at a bad time? I said, no. Because the whole time I'm going, why is she calling me? She said, I don't know if you know this. She said, but I'm on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She said, there's a position that we believe Terry should have, and I think you'd be perfect for it. She said, do you know Terry? I said, everybody knows Terry. So I get off the phone, and I'm sitting there going, okay, God, why would I go there? I don't even like rock and roll music. The whole thing was like, it made no sense to me. So I got in touch with Terry, and I said, Terry, Dr. Thornton tells me that there's a position that you all are thinking of creating. Do you have a job description? Terry's response was, no, it's in my head. I said, okay, do you mind if I get on your calendar? Let's do a debrief. So at the end of the conversation, and I'm a planner. Again, I'm not sure if we talked about that. I am a change agent. I like putting stuff together. So at the end of his conversation, I went home, and I've got all these ideas in my head about what it could be. So I wrote the job description. I put together 3 different org charts. It could be this, it could be this, could be this for Terry. We talked for about 5 months. And I think it was because it wasn't Terry's idea. It was the board who wanted Terry to create that position. He needed to be comfortable with the role and then me in the role. Okay. So 5 months in, Terry calls me and offers me the position. That's how I got there. But it wasn't that I said, oh, I can't wait to work at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. God said, do this. And he told me, get ready to move. So that was the first indication I needed to do something, getting ready, the preparation for it. The second part was, God, I don't understand why you had me to talk to Jim and then this process. And what I heard in my spirit was, it was important to talk to Jim, because had Jim not said a nonprofit, I wasn't thinking nonprofit. I was thinking college, staying in college and higher ed. So Jim, it made me think differently. Right. To the possibility of something different. Then when the Ron Richard, the Cleveland Foundation part didn't work out, I was like, again, okay, God, what was that about? Again, looking for the lesson in it. And the lesson at the time that he told me about was Noah and the Ark. And the lesson in that was, if you remember the story, he sends out a bird, I think it was a raven. First time, it comes back because there's no place for it to land. The second time, it brings back some leaves or some twigs. And God said to me, he said, the Cleveland Foundation, that particular position, he said, consider that twigs in the water. It's not the thing, but it tells you that you're on the right road. So that by the time Dr. Thornton says to me, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I now had this process to switch, go from I'm only doing higher ed to I'm open to a nonprofit. This isn't the nonprofit, but it confirms that I am on the right road to a nonprofit. And then Dr. Thornton then says, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then that door opens. God had to get me there, because I would have completely ignored it had it not been for that process.
I know you had a lot of great times there, and we got a chance to rekindle our relationship there. I had worked on Ted Strickland's campaign for governor, and I think it was Jeff Resnick called me up and told me that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was considering bringing on, I guess they were renewing their contract for lobbyists for them. And you guys, actually, I'm going to say I believe what happened. Okay. I believe what happened was they were going to pick this other company to do it. And I believe you helped me out a little bit, and they got me in on the contract too.
No, I did help you out a little.
That's what I would say, because
they didn't know who you were necessarily.
Exactly.
And I kept saying, no, he is extremely well connected.
Yes,
because you were the local
right,
lobbyist.
Exactly.
And then we had a state lobbyist, and then we had a federal lobbyist.
Federal lobbyist, and I ended up working with Ed Hogan and Derek Clay.
That's right.
Yeah, and me and Derek Clay still working together right now.
Really?
Yeah, we still work together right now.
Yeah.
And we worked on that campaign together, had an opportunity to work on that, did some great stuff. You gave me a chance to go to the greatest party ever in my life. I have never been to, me and my wife went to that party, and when you walk in there, you just see everything. You're just walking around, wow, where did they get these guys coming from the ceiling from? Like, what is all of this? I've never been to a party like that before, and never been back neither. So anybody out there will give me a ticket, I would love to go. I know you missed that.
I missed the induction ceremonies and any other parties.
And this year was Jay-Z was there.
Oh my gosh, Jay-Z, LL Cool J.
Yeah.
So I was there, but not where I normally would have been at. I worked
exactly.
Yeah.
Because remember, that night we hung out.
Yep.
And we hung out with Tone Loc, out of all people. The guy made Funky Cold Medina and Wild Thing. But we did get a chance to hang out with a celebrity.
I miss, those are the kinds of experiences that I miss. Let me say it this way. I knew I was privileged. Mm-hmm. I was the only black person in a senior position. When I got there was another person who was a vice president. Mm-hmm. Shortly after I got there, he left. But I was the first African-American female VP at the Rock Hall. And I knew sitting in the seat that I was privileged. I knew, but having said that, I also knew that there was a responsibility for sitting in the seat. Mm-hmm. And I'll talk a little bit about the stuff I miss, and I'll come back to the sitting in the seat. I miss being able to meet people that you've only read about and seen on television.
I know you have to miss that.
I miss being able to see things that most people don't get a chance to see. And I'm not even talking about just the people, but they had in the Rock Hall, and I believe they still have it, they have a lock of Bob Marley. The guy who coined the phrase rock and roll, I can't remember his name right now, but his ashes were in the wall.
Oh, I remember we talked about that. What was his name? Alan something? Alan Freed, right. That was the whole thing about that, you're right.
Yeah, it was, or periodically, I would meet people. The only time I've ever met Don King was at the Rock Hall. And he was with he was with an inductee, but I didn't know who the inductee was. So I would usually get the call for special guests for the Rock Hall. I'm not talking about performers. Those people, usually the curator would normally get those calls. But anybody who was like a special guest or VIP or something like that, I would get that call. So I got the call that Mr. King was at the back. And when I got to our security area, Mr. King wasn't there. There was another guy there. His name was Lloyd Price, and Lloyd just passed this year. And so Lloyd said, well, I'm here for Mr. King. He and Don King were very close friends. So he said, I just want to make sure everything was okay. And I was like, okay. And so then Mr. King walked in the door, and this man is like huge, you know, and I'm not even counting the hair. But so I welcomed him to the Rock Hall, and I walked him over to Terry's office. And there was some kind of event that afternoon on the center stage at the Rock Hall. And so Terry gets up and he says, and we're honored to have one of our inductees here. And I'm looking around and go, who? And it was the guy who was with Don King.
Wow.
Lloyd Price. So Lloyd Price, when 1950s, he was huge. He had several hits, but one was Lottie Miss Claudie, Personality. So I'm sitting there going, oh my God, that was an inductee. And I wasn't mean to him or anything like that. I was very gracious. But I told him, I said, Mr. Floyd, I said, if I had, known, Mr. Price, if I had known that you were an inductee, I would have, welcomed you back to your home. He said, oh yeah, don't worry about it. He didn't care about those kinds of things. I met Aretha Franklin, and I've got pictures with a lot of these people. Morgan Freeman, favorite story. It was, I had just gotten to the Rock Hall maybe a week or two before, and they had an event. And I get to the hotel where they're having this event, and the person who works for the Rock Hall says, if you go to the right, our board members are there. No, if you go to the left, our board members are there. If you go to the right, Morgan Freeman, where are you going? I went to the right. And another person who's real tall So I'm waiting in line to receive in line, and he's very gracious. And next thing I know, I say, hello, welcome to Cleveland. I walk away, and then somebody takes a picture with him. And so his assistant was there, and she said, would you like to take a picture with Mr. Freeman? I said, I'd love to. And so she walks up to him. She said, Morgan, this young lady would like to take a picture with you. Is that okay? He said, oh, absolutely. He was talking to this guy, this black guy. He was talking to him. And the guy thought he was going to get in a picture with us. Morgan Freeman turns and said, excuse me, you have to move. So when you see the picture with me and Morgan Freeman, I have a grin from ear to ear. He is like my new best friend.
All right.
So a few weeks later, or maybe a few days later, someone who was taking the pictures shows me pictures that he had taken with other people. I was the only one whose picture he was in, and he and I were smiling at each other and laughing. It was more like one of the best, and I just got into the rock. Just got there, yeah. And then all the induction ceremonies, and I met John Legend before he was really John Legend. Those are the kinds of things that I missed. I missed. You feel, and I don't know, part of it was just working at the Rock Hall, but the other part of it that I learned was the level issue. What I mean by that is, because I was a vice president, there were certain things that were afforded to me that weren't afforded to other people. So there was a concert. I was expecting to be, if not in the front row, second, third, fourth row, or on the main floor, or in a place of honor, if you want to call it that. And again, I recognize the privilege of that, and I never took that for granted. I recognized that this was a moment in time. It was going to last for however long it lasted, and so I tried to enjoy it for as long as I was there.
It's totally awesome. There's a lot of good work there. That archive that you were able to put together there, that was what, $13 million or so?
$13 million project. Yeah. But let me tell you how I got that. I was minding my business, and two people were standing in front of my office, and they were arguing. And so I don't believe in doing that. Let's figure out a solution to the issue. So I said to the two people, gentlemen, would it be helpful if I interview everybody to find out what they believe to be true and what part they want to play or need to play in this? And Terry gave me the responsibility for doing that because I volunteered to do it. So I did put a quick report together, said this is what everybody understands, this is what, okay. Terry then comes to me and said, you know, this is like strategic planning, which was my responsibility there. And so next thing I know, he hands me this project. I knew like that much about construction. But what I believed to be true was, because I was a person who liked building, that we'd figure it out. And like I said, me and God, we figured. And so I'm very proud of that. Every time I drive past, I go, that's my building.
I can tell you something else you should be very proud about. And I tell people this. I didn't recognize or thought about it until recently. I flew to Atlanta. And when I was coming through the airport, me and Dorinda was walking through there, and I saw the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the airport. And I told Dorinda, I said, yeah, Dr. Chisholm put that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in this airport, and nobody will ever give us credit for it, and nobody would never say anything about it, because there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, oh, no, it was me who did it. But I really remember we had, again, Jeff Resnick. I'll give shouts out to Jeff. He had called me up. He had a contract with British Airways, I believe, who was doing the actual service out there, management of the service of the airport. And at that time, he had asked me to find minority businesses who may want to open up businesses at the airport. And at that time, I took him to Bubble Baker, who used to play football, because he had the rib joint. We went to Hot Sauce Williams. We went to all these places trying to get people to come out and do business at the airport. And I ended up calling you. And I said, Dr. Chisholm, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not out at the airport.
You sure did. I remember that now.
I said, the first thing people should see when they come into Cleveland should be the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And it's still there.
And it's still there. And I called you, and we hooked you up with British Airways, and you guys put that together. And that's how, and I want the listeners and everyone know, that's how the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame got out to the airport. It was because of Dr. Chisholm and Kenn Dowell. And Jeff Resnick, who hired me to get it on, but we put that thing there, and that's how that thing got there.
I'd forgotten about that. There were so many things that we were doing, you know. And Ken, you and I both, our commitment is to do what we can to bring the resources that we have available to us to the community.
Yep.
That's all we cared about.
Yep.
And so when you made that call, and I completely forgot about it until you just said that, it was, and you pitched the idea of people should see us. And that's the thing, again, it goes back to business.
Exactly.
That's what they said, yes, and it's still there.
It's still there.
No, I forgot all about that.
And it didn't dawn on me because me and her was walking through there, and I looked at her, I said, you know what?
Forgot all about that.
I said, Dorinda, nobody will never believe this, but I put that thing there. And it's all over there pointing. I said, nobody will never believe it. Nobody will never say nothing. But I did that. And so that was one of the things. And I'll tell you something else that we talked about. And recently I drove down there to the Rock and Roll, just out there on the port, and I looked and seen how they done rebuilt everything down there and put up the stage down there and everything. And I remember me and you, I had another brainstorm one night, and I came up and called you and said, hey, I got an idea. I said, we ought to go in the back of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We should put a floating stage back there. I said we should we should do all of this. We should put big stages back here so people can bring their boats in. We can do concerts back there. And the only thing they did different that we talked about putting a jumbotron on that crazy square part of the building so that people can see it on the jumbotron. We did all of that, and I looked and I saw all of that down there, and I was talking to somebody. I said, that was my idea right there too. But I was glad to see all of that came to fruition, and had a lot of great times with you over there, and that was just another example of, like I said, over the years, how we were able to work together and get things.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're rocking with a GOAT. Kenn Dowell giving you motivation for growth. 2 toes down, he keep it realer than most. He do it for the culture, that's always the goal. Giving inspiration through information, providing liberation with conversation, giving fresh insight for elevation, cause he knows this is how we reach our greatness. And he riding with the people.
All right. So, I want to talk a little bit, Doctor, about your blog you put together. Dr. Jackie Chisholm is the blog. And in the blog, I'm going to go through a couple of things because I read a few of your things, and I also have my daughter doing some research with me on it, and she was reading a few of your posts on there. First of all, let's talk about the blog itself and what inspired you to want to write the blog, and what in your life when you got to that point of, you know what, I feel like I want to put this to paper. And I can understand that because that's kind of where I'm at with this thing here. It's sort of like everybody keeps saying, you want to write a book? I kind of do, but I kind of want to tell people stories and kind of let them share in the experiences as well. So give me your thoughts on why you feel that you thought it was time to start writing a blog.
So this is another God moment. I wasn't thinking about a blog. I really wasn't. And I heard in my spirit that it was something that I needed to do. So I started doing a little research like you, like how does one go about doing it? So there are no stories that I've told in that blog that were generated by me. Not one. Every story that I've written was because God put it on my heart to write. That's it. Because I've tried to be one of those bloggers who every week you put up some new content. It doesn't work for me. If I'm not led to do it, I don't do it because it's not about me. That blog was created because God had a word for his people, whomever his people are, that blog is for, that specific blog.
I heard you say once before that you're not religious, you're spiritual.
Very spiritual.
So let's talk about that, because you talk a lot about your relationship with God and him speaking to you and helping you with your moves as you go through life. So the difference to you, spiritual versus...
So I was religious for a long time. And religion for me, I was Baptist, I was CUC, Church of God in Christ. And each one of those has its tenets. There's certain things that it believes and that it teaches. The difference for me was when I was filled with the Holy Spirit in my office at Case. So it was a very difficult time in my life. A lot of stuff was happening. And there was a friend that I had made, and she was spiritual. And she believed in Holy Spirit and, you know, being filled with the Holy Spirit. And so did I, because in Church of God in Christ, that's all it's about is, you know, being filled with
Holy rollers.
That's it. Holy rollers. It was a period of time where my kids, they were younger, and stuff was happening in school. Husband, you know, our marriage was falling apart, and at least that's how it felt. Work was just, and I went to God and I was like, look, I believe you're real, but I don't know that. I said, but this is what I'm going to do. And I had my finger up into the ceiling. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to read my Bible, and I'm going to pray. And if you don't prove yourself to be God to me, I will know that you are a figment of my imagination. Just like that. I got to a point, everything in my life was problematic. Everything. It seemed to be falling apart. And when those experiences happen, usually the first thing you do is you start praying. And you look to God.
You know, for tired.
Yeah, I'm done. Because everything that I believe, none of that was happening. I did my part. I started praying. I started reading my Bible every day. And my friend was talking to me about her experience, you know, and the Holy Spirit and who he was. So there was one day I was getting ready for work, and I was watching Televangelist. And he started teaching about the Holy Spirit. And he talked about the fact that the Holy Spirit, that Jesus breathed the Holy Spirit on his disciples, but the Holy Spirit didn't manifest for 40 days. I was like, oh, I'd never heard that before. So, you know, I finish getting dressed, I go to work. And so for whatever reason, I couldn't focus on my work that day. And so I heard in my spirit, praise me. Now, my office was in the basement, and I had one little window. So the window looked up. I could see the sky. So I just stopped, and I started thanking God for my family, for my job. And all of a sudden, as I'm doing that, my chest kind of puffs out, and all of a sudden, words start flowing through my mouth that sounded Arabic to me. Holy Spirit being infilled. I'm in my office. Fortunately, I closed my door because these words are flowing out of my mouth, and I'm going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's real. And then the next thought was, well, what am I supposed to do? Does it stop on its own? Do I stop it? I mean, what are we doing? Next thing you know, I'm on the floor in my office in tears for an hour.
Really?
Somewhere in there, all of a sudden, it stopped. And it was like, I picked myself off the floor, wiped my face, called my girlfriend. Next thing you know, she starts speaking in tongues, and she's at her desk. I start speaking in tongues again. So she says, get off the phone, call your pastor, call your husband. Tell them what happened. So called my pastor. My pastor said, oh, that's nice. Let me know what happens, which is not what I expected. I expected my pastor to say, now that that's happened,
right,
let's tell you what this is about. So the difference to me, in answer to your question, my religion was what I learned in the book. Spiritually is what I experienced in my office. Once I had that experience of the Holy Spirit, God years later said to me, well, now that you know it's me, now I had something, a foundation from which, you know, to understand what that was. So for me, the difference between religion is what I was taught and then what I experienced.
And what church you go to now?
So I am a proud member of the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church.
No, Reverend Coven.
That's right, Reverend Coven, Reverend Dr. Coven.
Another thing that you talked about in your blog was why you wrote the blog and getting into that. So give me a little bit of why you thought it was time now to actually put it to paper.
Because the way God has a tendency to talk to me. The reason that I'm Dr. Chisholm was because God told me that I needed to get a master's degree. And on the way to getting a master's, I found out at the comprehensive exam that I had to take that if I high passed it, I would be automatically admitted to the PhD program. Initially, the reason I went to Case was to become a physician. So I looked up and said, wait a minute, is that the kind of doctor you wanted me to be, God? Then, you know, almost every position I've had in the last 30 years is because God directed me to it. Same thing is true with the blog. At the time, I was like, okay, God, you want me to do it. And what I realized was if it is God's project, he'll tell me what to write. And he'll tell me when to write it. And so I only write when God gives me a word. And if he doesn't give me a word, I don't write.
This one is one that I liked here. I personally can relate to I'm in the room. We often compare ourselves to people around us who might be 2 steps ahead or in front of us. I like that one. My daughter really liked that one also because it made me even think, from my experience, I've been in the room a lot.
Yes, you have.
And there's a lot of people who might say, I don't belong in that room, you know, and I've been in there and I can relate totally to how many steps in front of them, how many steps in front of me they are, you know, and I sit back. But I kind of get over that. You know. They can go front, but they still always have to come back.
You know, it's funny. Years ago, I used to complain about the fact that I was the only, you know, person of color in the room.
Right.
You and I had this conversation. And I used to complain about that all the time. Why am I the only black person? Or you get tired of being the only black person. Because people have a tendency to treat you like you're E.F. Hutton.
Right.
Then you speak for all black people,
Exactly.
and you know you don't.
Exactly.
But I said this to a friend of mine, and she said she complained to her son about the same thing. And her son said to her, God must trust you if he keeps putting you in that position. And so it gave me a completely different view of, and you kind of mentioned this, about other people who may not think you're supposed to be in the room. But if God placed you there, then you're supposed to be in the room, and that's sufficient, that you're in the room. So the way that happened, I had been selected to participate in Leadership Cleveland. And it was because my boss, Terry Stewart, was the one who nominated me for Leadership Cleveland. I didn't get in the first time. And my ego was like, well, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. So one of the exercises was the one that this is based on.
Okay.
I can't remember her name, but she had all of us in the program. There was 50 some of us. And we were in this large room. So we all started at one wall. And the goal was to walk to the other wall. But in order to do that, you can only get steps based on answers to a question. So I would say everybody who has a high school diploma, take 1 step. Everyone who has a college degree, take 2 steps. Everyone whose parents have a college degree, take, you know. And so she would keep saying these things, and for every time it was true for you, you could take as many steps as she indicated. Well, I only took 7 steps.
Wow.
I was closer to the front, the start, than I was to the end. And in that moment, I was like, dang. I mean, there were people who could have walked through the other wall.
Wow.
Right, with all of their experiences and all the things that they had going for them. Literally, and there were like 4 of us who were still close to this wall. And I was like, oh man, look at all the privileges I didn't have. And the Holy Spirit said, but you're still in the room. They had all of that going for them. And they still managed to be in the same place at the same time you are right now.
Wow.
It was catalytic for me in terms of the thought of, so God, what you're saying is, I don't need all of that in order to get where you want me to go. I need you. Every door that's been opened is because God opened it. There are doors that were closed that at the time I didn't understand why they were closed, but so thankful that they were. And so I've learned over time, my prayer has become, Father, open the door so wide that I can't help but know that's where you want me to go. And if it's not where you want me to go, close the door, change the lock. So I will not try to force my way in. And I've been really good about that probably for the last 30 years. You know, that I trust that God has my best interests at heart.
What was one of your favorites? I'm going to tell you the one I think it is.
Okay.
I like this one here.
Okay.
It was the Art of Maintaining Your Crown. I figured that's the one you was going to say. I like that. The Art of Maintaining Your Crown.
Yeah.
The Burden of Leadership. The Art of Maintaining Your Crown. I got my glasses on, that's why. I now feel that I'm ready to cultivate some old ground in a new way as a result of my experiences over the past 5 years in a C-suite leadership position.
Yeah.
So basically you're saying that you're ready to tackle some of your old stuff with some of the new stuff that you learned. Is that what you were trying to say with that?
So, I'm writing a book.
Okay.
And the book is called Lessons in Leadership, Notes from and for the Journey.
Okay.
And so when I was talking about that, it was, God told me years ago, he talked to me about Hansel and Gretel. The part that resonates with me is leaving breadcrumbs. There are a lot of us who go through life without paying attention to how we did it. And I talked earlier about the lessons. For me, it's very important to learn the lesson, to understand the lessons that I'm learning, because God told me that I was going to have to explain it to somebody else. So every place I've been, especially in the last 30 years, since I now have an understanding that my life is not my own. So when God said that my life was not my own, the degree that I have, the degrees that I have, and while it's wonderful to hear the bios and everything, when I got the PhD, he said, it's a ministry tool. Don't make it more than that, because where I'm sending you, you're going to need one of those. So when you have that kind of mindset, that all of the wonderful experiences that I've had is because God put me there for a reason. And so I live my life for such a time as this. I'm here for such a time as this. I'm at step 4 for such a time as this. I'm on assignment. And so the blog is an assignment.
You know, I look at the blogs and all the other things that you've been through in your life. Hell, even some of the stuff you dealt with in your childhood coming up. It seems like all of that prepared you for the biggest challenge in your life. I heard you say once before, one of the biggest upsets or things that really forced you to dig deep was going through this situation that you went through with, I'm going to call it COGC
Yeah,
because
it was COGC
that's what it
at
was.
the time.
Right. It was an article written by Mark Namick back in January of 19. Chisholm Challengers was formidable. The agency, which has $40 million taxpayer-funded budget and provides numerous services for the poor, has been in a decade of controversy related to abusive salaries, expenses, patronage, ineffective board directors. It also got into where it says that several times the leadership of that organization was using a lot of patronage and using its political weight and others to get things done. We knew about some of the stuff that happened with the former president beforehand, and then just what you went through in order to try to do that. The reason why I picked Faith Without Works, and I talk about you and how much faith you have to have. I believe that situation and reading what I know and from talking with you is really one where your faith has to be there. I mean, we're talking about a situation where you go from going to a job where they hire you to telling you you're not working there no more to coming back to the same job that they attempted to fire you from, and to come back to get that job, and the main people that tried to do it are no longer there themselves. That's an awesome story, and I would like for you to share a little bit about your experience of going through that and what that meant for you.
So let's start with how I got there. Somebody came to me. My husband and I moved to Atlanta to do a project. The funding fell through, so we came back home. And people kept talking to me about this job. So I did a Google search. And what popped up was all of the stuff that was happening with the agency and with my predecessor, who at the time had gone to prison 4 months before. And so I literally said, oh, hell no. I'm not going to apply for that position. And people kept talking to me. Literally kept talking to me. I finally said, God, what about it? And it was, okay, look, God, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply. I had no expectation to get that job. I just said I was going to be obedient. I was going to apply. The headhunter called me, and I told her no. So then I had to call her back and say, okay, you know what, go ahead and put my name in. I had to have 6 interviews for a job I didn't want. And so interview number 4 was done. Before interview number 5, I said, God, look, I will for me what you will for me. I surrender. If this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. So I go to interview number 5. I get to interview number 6. And I said in interview number 6, my paycheck will not pay for my integrity. I've worked too hard for that, and nobody gets that. I was certain they weren't going to hire me, just making that statement, right? Especially given everything that had happened. So I get offered the position, and within 3 months, all hell breaks loose with the board. There are things that I can discuss. Anything that was already written in the newspaper, I can discuss. A portion of the board voted to terminate me. I refused to leave. And the reason I refused to leave was because 2 of the board members who voted to terminate me, their terms had already expired, which meant they shouldn't have been on the board in the first place. Long story short, I filed a lawsuit against those people. 3 months later, the board members who supported me also filed a lawsuit against the same people.
Wow.
That's when it became public.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, on a weekly basis, there are these articles for and against me. I had never had that kind of public scrutiny or humiliation. That's the way that it felt at the time, was being humiliated. My first conversation with God was, I thought you loved me. Why would you send me here knowing that this was going to happen? The next thought was, okay, Father, you have me here for a reason. You know I haven't done anything wrong. I know you need to get the glory in it, and I need you to vindicate me. And that was it. It was probably one of the top 3 worst experiences I've had in my life. It's the worst professional experience I've ever had. But going through it, God gave me grace. And it was important to go through all the other stuff to get to that. And I didn't know that at the time. Again, it goes back to the lessons that you learn. All I knew was all hell was breaking loose, and I hadn't done anything wrong. I literally gone there with the expressed intent to do the work. Community people need the services, and I tell our staff this all the time. It doesn't matter what door they walk in. We've got 10 different Head Start sites. We've got 4 neighborhood opportunity centers. We serve, I think last year, 42,000 people through our HEAP program. Doesn't matter what door they walk in. When they walk into any of our doors, they're here for help. And that's our job.
Right.
And if we're not going to do that, then close the door and get the money to somebody else. That was my mindset. We're here because there's a work we need to do. That's why it was important for me to stand up and say no. The not adhering to our bylaws jeopardizes the agency and its 501c3. And if that is jeopardized, then our funders are not going to give us any money, which means we have to cease operation. That's why I did that. And it's because God sent me there to do the work. So when it was all said and done, and just the way it all worked out, Jackie Chisholm couldn't take any credit for that. That was all God. start to finish. Now, while I had faith, at the end of the day, there was still work that needed to be done. What people fail to remember is there wasn't any land that they went into they didn't have to fight for it.
Right, exactly.
So even though God gave it to them, they still had to fight. So God helped me understand that just because I give it to you, there's still a part that you need to play. And so I understood that going into this situation. Now, I'll be the last person to tell you that was easy. I'd be the last person to tell you that I ever want to do that again. No, no, no. But we go through that period of time. As a result of all of that, we have, for the most part, almost a completely new board. We've diversified the board. Because of COVID, we've gone from a $40 million company to a $140 million company. The state trusts us in a way that they didn't trust. The feds trust us in a way they didn't trust us before because we're transparent. We do what's right. Because at the end of the day, the power that is more important to me to do the work is God needs to be pleased. I usually try to err on the side of what is the right thing to do here. Because at the end of the day, for me, I can justify doing the right thing. You may not agree with it, but I try not to have my ego in it because I recognize I'm on assignment. And as soon as God said that the assignment is over, I'm looking for the next assignment because it's never been about me. It's never about me. And I'm clear about that. And I realize that leadership is a responsibility, but it's a privilege. And to be a good leader, in my estimation, is you have to be a servant leader. And that's the phrase that's been coined by somebody else. I am only in a leadership position because God put me there. Which means that there's a work that I'm supposed to do while I'm sitting in this seat. He trusts me with sitting in the seat. I never take that for granted.
Let's move into step forward. You changed the name. The organization went through a name change because you wanted to make the name easier for people to understand what you guys are doing. So let's talk about the name change. Why step forward?
So during my interview, I suggested that they change the name.
Really?
And the reason for that is because the Council for Economic Opportunities in Greater Cleveland, it's a mouthful. And a lot of people knew us as CEOGC. But in order for you to understand who we were, the history, is I have to take you back to 1965 and the Economic Opportunity Act. That's where part of the name came from. So I had to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to help people understand to situate the name. And ideally, any good name is to be aspirational. It should say something. It should have some directionality to it. And that name didn't. It was just, and we didn't even have a logo. The challenge is there's history there, right? It was difficult. But we went through a strategic planning process. We hadn't had a strategic plan in 14 years. And in my estimation, you really need to understand who you are and where you're going. So I could keep doing stuff. I could tell you what I thought we needed to do as an agency, but that doesn't tell you where we're going. So as a part of that process, the consultants talk to our staff, our current clients, and potential clients, people who are eligible to receive our services but for whatever reason don't. Every one of those came back with, they should change the name. So we went through that process, and shout out to a woman named Susan Pufflia. So Susan was the one who walked us through a day-long process. What does this organization do? What does it mean? What are you trying to do? And she was the one who came down to that name of Step Forward, and it was perfect. And to be honest with you, initially when she told me about it, I was like, no.
Right, yeah. Because it seems so basic. You're like, oh.
She showed me a position paper. And when you walk into our offices, you see this on this huge poster now.
Right.
And if you go on our website, which is stepforwardtoday.org, there's a video. I've done the voiceover, and it's the whole script. And it talks about someday you'll do this and someday do that. And it said, it's time to step forward, where someday starts today. And as soon as I read that, I was like, got it.
Got it.
I understand what that means. And it's easy. It's easy to remember, but also it tells people our job is to help you step forward from where you are to where you want to go. That's our job.
You mentioned the fact that you guys went from $40 million to $140 million agency. That makes you one of the largest in the state at all,
No,
right?
we are the largest. We were the largest in the state at $40 million.
So let's talk about some of the programs that you guys do there. I know everyone knows about the HEAP program. In fact, I used to work in the HEAP program. It used to have an agency on Somerset and 105th back in the days. Mr. Phoney, he was the guy back then. Robert Hamilton, he still working with you guys.
Bob is still with us.
Yeah, I started out with him, and Beverly Charles. Beverly
Oh,
Charles.
I didn't know that.
Beverly Charles, Robert Hamilton. So I worked at COGC doing a HEAT program. I did, I think, 2 seasons, matter of fact. So I do know about the HEAT program. We know about your program that you do with children and Head Start program. So let's talk about a couple other things that people may not know that you guys are doing.
Most people are not aware that we do counseling. So we have social workers, licensed social workers who meet with people. And that's especially important today because of what's happening with the pandemic and stress that people are under. We really weren't in the rental space. It was CHN Housing Partners that was mostly, doing the rental assistance and things like that. So now we do rent, mortgage, water, and sewer. So those are things that we didn't do in the past.
What about the mortgage program? You have to be income eligible.
Income eligible. So, we're not just the city of Cleveland.
Really?
People just assume that we were city of Cleveland because most of our sites were in the city of Cleveland. So we've expanded to make sure that we're covering Cuyahoga County. That was one of the other issues. It made sense when we first created. Most of it was poverty in Cleveland mostly. That's not true anymore. Poverty moved into the suburbs about 20, 30 years ago, and we didn't move with it. So we just opened up a new office in Middleburg Heights, and we're looking for an office in, I think, Euclid. So we're just trying to make certain that we're covering Cuyahoga County. So mortgage, as long as the funding is available, we can do mortgage assistance. You would apply online, stepforwardtoday.org. Go to that particular tab, and everything is on. It's an online process.
I remember hearing you talk before, and you mentioned that when you was growing up with your mom and programs that you guys would even apply for. Have they did anything to do better with these income regulations on any of these programs? So
I will say that because of pandemic, they've raised the eligibility. Okay. So a lot of the programs were you had to be 125% of poverty. Now they're 200%. We're trying to make those permanent because the poverty indicators, they haven't changed in like 30, 40 years. So even though more people are in poverty, if I make $1 too much, you're not eligible. Right? Now, that's not true in Head Start. So in Head Start, the federal government allows us to take 10% of our allotted number of students. They can be over income, only 10%. So we have 2,700 and 2,800 children that we can serve. So only 280 of those can be over income. The vast majority have to be income eligible. But that's really the only program. Every other program, if you're not income eligible, you can't participate in it. When we talk about the programs that you guys got there, is there any program, I know that you guys do a teaching program where you help with jobs and try to help folks. So workforce development. Let's talk a little bit about the workforce development, because right now we work with Ohio Means Jobs, and we do it. Yeah, and you guys do as well, and trying to help. And the big thing now, if you go around, there's hiring signs like everywhere. There's a Taco Bell in our neighborhood that's paying $20 an hour. I couldn't believe it. And I worked at Taco Bell growing up, and there was nowhere in the world they was paying us no like $7 or $8 an hour. Right, exactly. So with that, are you having the same challenges? So let's talk 2 things. Number one is we call workforce development professional development services. So we help people find jobs, and we've been doing that for a long time. Before I started working at CEOGC at the time, I was at Case, and every week I would get CEOGC's list. Of jobs, I remember that. So everybody's aware of those. Exactly. And then we have our own problems within the agency. So we need teachers. The Head Start program, there are classrooms we can't open because we don't have enough teachers. So many of the people who do Head Start are committed to, they like little people. They like little children. Dr. Wilson, who's in charge of that program, she likes going to the site so she can get what she calls knee hugs from the kids. So the teachers were in their 60s, 70s, sometimes 80s. Well, because of the pandemic, they left. Right. They retired. We can't replace them. We were having a hard time replacing teachers before because a teacher in early childhood doesn't get paid the same as a teacher in a district in K-12 education. And that's a disparity that's been there for a long time. So let's talk about the difference in that and the qualifications you need to be if you wanted to be one of those teachers in a daycare. So let's start with Step Up to Quality. So Step Up to Quality is something that was created by the state of Ohio, and it's a rating system on a scale of 1 to 5. If you are 5-star, then your teachers have to have some type of credential. If you are operating a daycare, the thing that I believe that they have to have is a CDA. It's called a Child Development Associates. It's not an associate's degree certificate, but I think that's the minimum qualification for a person operating a daycare or what we now call an early child center. For us, the only people who need CDAs, who must have a CDA, are what we call, and these are the first line people, and these are education aides. At least we're trying to get it to a minimum of $15. If you want to be an assistant teacher in the classroom, you minimally have to have an associate's degree. And if you want to be a lead teacher, the main teacher in the classroom, you have to have a bachelor's degree. Well, that teacher with a bachelor's degree, and now I've been told that some districts are even accepting teachers with associate's degrees. So if they make 18 to 20 with us, a district can pay them 25 to 30. So we're losing teachers, not just the ones who retired, but we're losing our credentialed teachers to districts. Everybody's having this issue.
Wow.
And as far as the workforce development, everybody's bemoaning, like, where are the workers? It's not like, people didn't disappear.
Right. That many people.
Yeah, people didn't disappear, but everybody's looking for workers. And like you said, they're paying $20. I know we've lost at least one teacher to Amazon. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Because Amazon is paying what, $15 an hour, $1,000 bonus. Now that I believe that teacher came back because they didn't realize how hard they had to work at Amazon, right? Versus working with our kids. And it's not like teaching is an easy thing to do, but the impact is so much greater. Again, going back to what I said before about when I was a case, I love seeing somebody succeed. Can you imagine being the teacher of a 4-year-old?
Oh yeah.
Who still remembers you? You're not going to get that Amazon. There's not a person who's going to wait. When you get your Amazon box, they go, oh, I wonder who packed this.
Right.
You're not going to do it. Whereas in education, I can name you the teachers. I can name elementary school, middle school, high school, college. I can tell you who the impactful people were. So we're looking for good people like that, people who care, who are passionate about making a difference in somebody's life. But the bigger picture is none of us know what's going on
with these jobs.
We have all these jobs available. We work with people who are interested in getting jobs. We prepare them for the interview. We help them understand what it means to have a full-time job and the responsibilities. It's not as important to us for you to get the job, but we want you to keep the job.
Right.
My mother didn't apply for these programs. My mother applied for welfare, and they said she made $5 too much. And the story I told you was I only saw my mother cry twice. And the first time was when she lost a dear friend of hers. And the second time was the day she got the letter that said she made $5 too much, and she didn't know how she was going to pay, feed her family. And that's all I heard her say. And that's part of the reason that she married an alcoholic, because that was a way for her to feed her children.
With first step forward as of now, other than employment, is there any other big challenges on the forefront that you see going on with the vaccinations and people lack of?
In March of this year, made a decision to require that anyone who works directly with our clients be vaccinated. So we did that in March, long before everybody did mandates and all that other stuff. We mandated it. Our board approved it. Then when President Biden came out with his mandate in September, then that just captured everybody else who wasn't doing direct service. So at this point, we're 92% vaccinated in our agency. I'm really proud of that. We have, I think, 4% who've asked for either a religious or a medical accommodation. And a medical accommodation could be something as simple as I'm pregnant. My colleagues downstate, this has been a major issue for them. Because if you are in a red part of Ohio, that, oh, my body, my whatever, they're not interested in getting vaccinated. They don't believe in masks. They don't believe in any of that stuff. We haven't really had that issue. I haven't seen that as much in Cuyahoga County.
Just a couple more questions. First is, if you ruled the world, how would you finish that?
Ooh, if I ruled the world, one of the things that I would love to see, I think we've lost the human touch. We've lost compassion. When you look at the political scene now, it's about me getting mine. And if I have to step on you to get it, I'm okay with that. And if we've demonized people, I can't just disagree with your position. You have to be the devil. You have to be somebody that I have to hurt in some way.
So I'm going to let you close our show.
Okay.
You get a chance to talk about the importance of the HEAP program that's coming up. So maybe a couple of programs you think that's important at COGC. Make sure we give out the web address, any contact information.
Sure. Okay. First, let me thank you for this opportunity, because when you called me, I was shocked.
No problem.
So I thank you.
Thank you.
I'm privileged to be the CEO of Step Forward. So number one, I would want you to know that we're here for you. For anybody who needs our help, we're here. So it's not just a Head Start program. We're still enrolling for that. And all the information you can find on stepforwardtoday.org on our website. If you're interested in finding a job, our job is to help you find a job. If you need counseling services, this is a stressful time for a lot of people. We have licensed social workers who are more than happy to help you through this. Kenn mentioned the Home Energy Assistance Program, HEAP. The Winter Crisis Program began November 1st. Again, just go to our website and you can find out all the information and you can apply online. And then finally, for emergency services. If you're unemployed, you're income eligible. We do rental, mortgage, water, and sewer assistance, our emergency services. In addition to that, if you need food, we have food vouchers. We do bus transportation, vouchers for that, or tickets for that. We also help people with furniture and clothing. So there are a number of things that the agency offers. But again, just go to our website, stepforwardtoday.org.
Again, thank you for coming out to our show. We appreciate it. This is my first show.
The reason, Kenn, that I've always enjoyed working with you is because you've always been a straight shooter. Always. I've never known you to say one thing and do something else.
This is Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell. Ladies and gentlemen, you're rocking with a GOAT. Kenn Dowell giving you motivation for growth. 2 toes down, he keep it realer than most. He do it for the culture, that's always the goal. Giving inspiration through information, providing liberation with conversation.